Hello, my name is Matthew Lewis with Spotlight on North Hunterdon. Today we have the tremendous privilege to be here with Sergeant Major Jim Phinney. He has come to speak to North Hunterdon High School and has graciously come here to be interviewed today. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with the military?
Sure. Matt, I grew up in Massachusetts, an old New England family going back to the Mayflower. The second constable of Plymouth was my great-great-great-great-grandfather. Another grandfather came over on the Mayflower. And so I had a history of our family being involved militarily in every war, from the French and Indian War, the Civil War, and World War I, all of that. We also had an educated family. We weren't wealthy, but we were landowners, and we had Harvard graduates, and the founder, my uncle, was the founder of Phillips Academy in Exeter. So we had a lot of history and a lot of books. And as a kid, Gramp would say, "Go upstairs and read one of the books." And so I, at an early age, got introduced to Madison, to Jefferson, to the common sense, to the history of the Civil War and Grant, and World War I, because he had been in it for 4 years. So I had an interest in history. I had an interest in wars. I had older brothers. And our family, remember, I grew up in the 20s and 30s. We had wood stoves and outhouses until we finally got running water and electricity. We had group telephones, you know, you dial number 7 and that's Mabel, and Eleanor was the telephone operator, and she knew everybody and all the plugs that she had to put in so you could talk. And sometimes if somebody was talking on the line, because everybody could hear everybody talk and everybody listened to everybody talking, you'd say, "Hey Mabel, get off the line. I got to get hold of my uncle," or something. So that was life in those days, from outhouses to wood stoves and hard work. My first job was at 6. And on Saturdays, I got the end of the day, after working 8 hours a day, I got 5 pennies. And I was glad to get them. But they went a long way. I had to give 4 of the pennies to my mother to help with the family, and I could keep a penny for candy. And that was nice. And I could feed my brothers and my younger sister on that penny. So anyhow, that was youth. Very close family dinners regularly, discussions at family dinners, listening to the news, learning about the wars going on in China taking over Nanking and brutalizing and killing and raping over 200, 300,000 Chinese. What was happening in Russia with Trotsky and Lenin, and all the invasion of the Russian Empire being killed and the Communist Empire being developed. And then Germany beginning already with Hitler and the Gestapo in the mid-30s, beginning to build up things quietly. We knew things were going on, but we really didn't know much because nobody was talking about it. And so when 39 and 41, when the war started, came, my family had a deep interest in it. My older brothers couldn't wait to finish high school and be able to go in. And when Pearl Harbor happened in 41, my oldest brother enlisted the very next day, went in the Navy. He got killed at Midway in 42 on the battleship aircraft carrier Saratoga. And my next older brother went into the Army. He got killed in Aachen later on in 44. And my third older brother went into the Air Force, was a B-17 pilot. And each of them, before they went in, told me I was 3 years younger than they were. So I was only, when they went in, I was 13, 14. And each of them, when they went in, told me, "You're not to enlist and go in. We don't want you going in combat. You're the last young boy in this family. We're going to fight the war, and you stay home and take care of your sister and your mother and father. And you got to promise me that." Well, I promised him with the crossed fingers back on my back, because I already wanted to go in. And I had my close friend Benny, and we grew up from first grade to high school together, and we played hockey together. We were cross country and track together. We were boy sopranos, getting paid singing in Boston together. So we were really close buddies. We did everything together. And we both wanted to go. Well, sophomore year in high school, we decided, against our mother and father's wishes, that we were going to enlist and go in. And the draft and being selected or enlisted really started at age 18. We lied about our age. And
was it difficult to get around, or did you manage?
Well, the recruiters, they were trying to get enough bodies together for the invasion of D-Day in England. So they were really looking for red blood as long as it could walk. And when we went to the recruiting station with our, you could really see where we had corrected the age when we were born, from 27 to 25. He knew that we were lying, but he just kind of smiled at us and said, "Do you have red blood?" And when we said yes, he stamped the approval, and we were in, and went to boot camp at Fort Devens for infantry training, and both did well. We were good athletes, and we had some intelligence, and so we accelerated. Our program was accelerated because of the need to get troops over to Europe. So rather than for just infantry training with maneuvers, which would normally be 9 to 11 months, we completed the whole thing in 3 months. And we completed with expert infantry and got an expert infantry badge, which meant that when we hit a target, we had 5 bullseyes every time we did it. You had to do it 3 times, 5 bullseyes, to pass on to a higher grade in the Army. And we wanted to, well, we didn't know what we wanted, but we were listening to whatever was available. So we passed that. The captain called us in and said, you have accelerated, you're experts, you're ready to move on, pack your bags, you're leaving tomorrow and you're going to Fort Benning. You're going to become a ranger paratrooper. And we packed the bags and went, just Benny and I. We went there, accelerated. It's supposed to be 11 months with maneuvers down in Florida. We finished it in 3 months, and we excelled and we did well. We got.
And what year was this around?
This was 1943.
Okay.
We were just finished our sophomore year, and we did it between July 1st of 43 when we went in and signed up, and April of 44 when they shipped us to England for the D-Day landing.
Okay.
And after our accelerated ranger program and paratrooper, making the 5 required jumps and so forth, and all of the ranger requirements of shooting and crawling and jungle warfare and launching, landing on the beach, training and everything else that went with it, the captain called us in and said, "Pack your bags, you're leaving tomorrow. We want you to go into the newly organized Office of Strategic Forces, which became the Special Forces in time, under Bill Donovan, Colonel Bill Donovan, and we became trained for special force missions back of the enemy line. And so we were trained as very difficult training, accelerated again, and then we were off to England. Got to England, went to Scotland in April of 44 for final training with the British and Free French Special Force trainers. And a Sergeant Benchley helped us, giving us tips of what was going to happen on D-Day and during the bulge with the cold weather and everything. That helped to save our lives, but we were very, very lucky. But we were the kids. The trained troops, when we got to England, were seasoned veterans. They had been fighting in Italy. Some of them had been fighting in Africa. They had been training for over a year in England And we came, we only had, 3 weeks of training before they started to ship us down, getting ready for getting onto the boats for D-Day. So the sergeant pulled us out every day for lunch and gave us some tips, because he said, you're the youngest kids and we know you're not of age and you haven't been through any combat, so you really don't know anything. You're going to meet with me for 5 days and I'm going to give you a few things that you need to remember to save your lives, if you're lucky. And he did. And so as young kids, the older guys who were seasoned troops didn't want us with them going into combat, because they didn't know if we would stand up to combat, so whether we'd be afraid or what.
Were you involved with the actual landing at Normandy, or were you involved in the paratroop?
The paratroopers went in, the 101st and the 82nd, one south and one north, went in to support the landing. The 75th Ranger Regiment, 2nd Battalion, to which I was attached, only as a part of them as a ranger, because our special force missions wouldn't start until after the landing. So the Free French were doing special missions back of the enemy lines for and during the landing. But we had to wait until after the landing to get special missions back of the enemy lines. So we were to land on Normandy. The trained troops were going to climb the big Duhawk cliff and get the big guns. That was the major, the big guns could knock out our ships and everything else. And the Ranger main force of trained people took that Duhawk. The rest of us were assigned to the 29th Infantry Division, 116th Infantry, as an attachment for the landing, and we landed on the second wave at Omaha Beach. The first group was 50,000, and half of them were dead before they got to the beach. We were...
What was going through your head as you're...
Scared to death. Scared to death. Excited. Fear is the first thing. Honor, duty, and country is the second thing. I'm here to do a job, and I got my job, and I've been well trained, so and I've got to get the courage to do it.
You never felt any regret for signing up at a young age?
Oh, never. Oh, no. Proud, scared out of my wits. The noise of that the blast when they first started it a half an hour before we would go in landing. All the ships started. There were 30,000 ships out there, most of them supply, but a lot of them military. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, minesweepers, everything. And everybody, all of a sudden at 7 o'clock, boom, everybody started shooting. The flashes, the noise. It was the worst 4th of July you ever imagined. And swells of the waves, it has still been stormy, the waves, the water was coming in the boats. We had to use our helmets and swishing out the water of our LST that held 32 men ready to launch into the water. The water was cold, the water was high. Half of the men had a great big banquet to feed everybody their big meal before the big fight, which was one of the worst ever they made, because 50% of everybody who was going to land ended up being seasick from all the food they ate. Benny and I knew about seasickness. We only ate a candy bar. And rather than eating the steak and the potatoes and the gravy and everything else, including ice cream, and those guys, we lost half of them from vomiting, and they couldn't control themselves in the water. They couldn't breathe enough from the vomiting, and they drowned or got shot or something else. So we made it to the shore, and as young kids, on the third day, just to shorten the story, we made it to the top by the third day. We were supposed to be 5 miles inland before the end of the first day. At the end of the first day, we were only 1,000 yards. We had just taken the top of the butte. And the third and fourth waves in the thousands. I mean, the first wave was 50,000 men. The second wave was 150,000 wave. The third wave was 500,000 men. The 6 waves and going on, by the time 3 days were over, we were supposed to have 2.5 million men on land. We didn't get 2.5 million men on land until the end of August. We didn't get 500,000 men on land until it was a month, June 26, 27, 28, around St. Lo. So it was a deadly. They held back the main waves with the big numbers of troops and supplies and the docks and all the equipment that we needed for half the day, rather than going in half an hour behind wave 2. They didn't start to come in until almost 5 o'clock in the afternoon, because it took us that long to get that first 1,000 yards.
And following the invasion and through the end of the war, what were some of your duties in the Army?
At St. Lo, my lieutenant and sergeant were killed or wounded, and we had a mission to take out a couple of machine guns and a tank because St. Lo was a critical road junction. And that was my third Special Forces mission. By then we were doing missions. And unfortunately, my lieutenant and sergeant got killed and wounded, and I was the youngest. They called me the kid. Most of the people I had on our team of 18 to 24 in our squads were married or had gone to college, were older than us. They called me the kid, and Benny, my buddy. And but the lieutenant and sergeant were killed, and nobody else knew what to do. They were just kind of standing around. Well, what do we do now? We don't have a leader who's in charge of us. And I started giving orders. And I became a leader from that on. And when we got to Aachen, I was a sergeant and in charge, and I never had a lieutenant or higher leader from that moment on, from Aachen on through the end of the war. I was a leader and called all commands, and had over 353 men on my teams, 151 of them who got killed or wounded before the end of the war. But I was proud of it. But the losses and the suffering and the losing of buddies and being responsible and carrying the guilt of surviving when men under me didn't survive is a lifelong burden. That's post-traumatic stress.
And on that note of feeling that burden of guilt, how were you able to come back home, and did that affect you throughout your time back home?
Before my last mission, in March of '44, we were ordered by General Eisenhower and General Montgomery to cover 25 square miles to reconnoiter, 25 square miles to find out everything the Germans had left for a final push. I had 14 men, including myself, on a team. We had teams of 2. We parachuted in with areas to cover in 5 days to get all the information about troops, supplies, numbers, ammunition, gas, location of machine guns, big guns, tanks, everything else. All the information we could. Get it back information to General Eisenhower on the 5th day. Well, the German 106 SS brigade was there. They are the roughest, the best trained, and meanest Germans under General von Rundstedt. And they knew we were there. They had wounded 3 of my men. So to finish the mission, we had to first go back and find, on the 5th day, go back and find the 3 men, finish their information gathering, then send 1 man, Ziggy, back to General Eisenhower, but make noise heading right into the midst of the 106 SS group so that they would not chase Ziggy, but try to shoot us. And so we surrendered, and we were all captured in POWs. The next week was 7 weeks of torture for all of us, very bad torture. All of my men in front of me trying to get me to talk. At the end of 7 days, we hadn't told them anything. They were getting desperate. They were beginning to burn papers and getting ready to leave because our troops were beginning to catch up. And so they brought each man in to me. My men, I had 13 left at that time. Excuse me, I had lost 3. I only had 11 men left. And of that 11 men, they shot the last day of the 7th day, 7 of them in front of me in the back of the head to try to get me to talk again. My head, I went into a coma and ended up 2 weeks later in England with my 2 men who were wounded very badly. And they died before I came out of my coma 45 days later. I had no memory. I had 8 months of intensive truth serum injections in my back and I didn't even know my own name. I didn't know my family, didn't know any battles that I've been in. And so I got through that. And I had to stay in. They told me that I had to stay in for another 3 years for the occupation of Germany. We won the war. For more rehab. And during that time, I got involved with the displaced persons from the death camps, slave labor camps, finding them jobs and interviewing them. It was a great experience. And then I also got involved with the millions of prisoners being held by Russia in the Siberian gulags. Tragic stories of death and famine and freezing, bad winters, and torture. And I made 5 trips to Moscow and brought back 5 for reparations of food and munitions. I was able to bring back 5 trips of about 2,500 prisoners, no Americans. We never saved 1 American. The Russians had 30,000 Americans. They all died there. So a great experience. Got out in '48 in college, and end of the first year, the Korean War started, and they called me back in to train troops and go over the front lines because we didn't know how the Koreans fought. So frontline duty for 6 months as Command Sergeant Major of the 6th Corps. 6 months in frontline foxholes, learning everything about the enemy and everything about our troops and what they needed for training. And then came back to the States for training, and then had a lot of hospitalization following up on some of my other injuries. And got on, spent a lifetime in education, 35 years with MIT, worked with the astronauts, worked with Special Olympics because of our handicapped son, worked with senior centers here. I work with the Wounded Warriors today in the equine program. I am doing classes and history up at West Point. And just last September, not this year, a year ago, I was a surprise guest at West Point with the Secretary of the Army, and the Command Sergeant of the Army, the Commandant of the West Point, and for a whole day of football and being with all of the cadets at West Point, and doing the cheers with the cheerleaders, having my picture taken and put up on the TV screen. And I didn't know it was going to happen. Real surprise with myself and my family. But I still go up there, sit in some of the classes, and it's a great experience to be able to help them understand things that I learned about making men, real tough men who can survive and live together and do our duty to God and country.
Being a leader yourself and growing up and maturing through this very important time in history, even from the 20s when you were born up until today, is there anything that you would have liked to lead differently any time in history? I know that that's sort of a broad question, but seeing that you have held these high positions within the military and outside of that.
Several things I'd say. Number one, America is the greatest country in the history of the world, without hesitation. I still feel that. I know that. We have done more good in the world than bad, for sure. We have done some bad things. We've had some bad people. We in the military, I did some bad things. I killed some people I wish I hadn't. But I had to. It was my duty. I had to have men kill people they didn't. I've been a sniper. And I can see the good part of sniping, but the horror of sniping. And I miss being faster than a German sniper with one German man who was trying to help us near the end of the war. And he was trying to signal us as to where the Germans and the tanks were and the big guns were. And the German sniper, before I could get ready with we didn't have binocular gun sights for snipers. We had to have a man beside us with binoculars looking to find the sniper. And he had his sight set because he had already been killing some of our men sniping out of the building. And a German man came and was trying to signal. He was tired of the war. I don't know whether he was a veteran, but he was an old German with a cane. And he was signaling to our troops to tell them that the Germans are around the corner. They're around the corner. And I was trying to quickly get to the sniper so the sniper on the German side wouldn't get to him. And I was too late. The German sniper got him before I got him. I did get him, but I lived with a horror of guilt that I missed saving that man's life because he was trying to save some of our lives. It's that all combat veterans go through, sense of guilt, sense of rage, and when they have moments of rage for any number of reasons. It could have been a bad dream. It could be a simple thing as standing close to an oven, a hot oven on the low oven, and opening the door and the blast hitting you in the face. It's happened to me at least 10 times. It happened to a young 29-year-old veterans of the Afghanistan 3 weeks ago. No, it's 4 weeks now. And he tried his 7th suicide with drugs because of the blast, reminding him of the blast when the mine went off and killed his buddies and wounded him, and the flash and everything just stays with you. And you live that. I didn't start talking about anything, even to my wife. I didn't talk to my mother and my father about combat. I didn't tell I promised my older brothers I would never go to combat. My oldest brother, who was living, was 92 and he died last April, and he never knew that I was in combat. And when somebody on Facebook got the word around trying to say that I was a hero, he called me last April before he died to say, what in the hell is this? You're going to, my God, what are you saying about you've been a POW and you've been this? I'm getting this on the Facebook from people. How can you're going to go to jail? That's guilty and everything else. And I still lied to him. I didn't have the heart to tell him because I promised him I wouldn't go to combat. And I lied again and had to call Mr. Simpson and tell him I can't talk for a while. I was on Facebook and I can't have it. And I don't want publicity. Someday I'll tell my nieces and nephews, maybe. But that's where the distress is done to me.
Well, thank you very much, Sergeant Major Phinney. It's been an absolute honor. And I, as do, I'm sure all of us, truly thank you for your service and everything that you've been providing, both overseas and as you've come home and shared your story with us.
Well,
we really do appreciate it. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's my privilege to be here. Thank you. Thank you.